Rochdale. Oh my God, what a shambles, what an embarrassment for Keir Starmer and the gang of right-wing genocidal Zionists that he's apparently decided to surround himself with. Well, the whole debacle, the whole spectacle, the fiasco has made three things perfectly clear to many people in this country. Number one, Starmer is not a strong, competent leader. 2, our media is biased. 3, Starmer is using antisemitism as a factional weapon. The only thing you really need to know to understand the dynamics of that whole situation in Rochdale is that Ali is very much a New Labour figure, very close to the right-wing faction that has now gained control of the Labour Party. I mean, we know this already. He wouldn't have been selected if he wasn't part of that faction. We've seen example after example where people, the slightest hint of previous support for Corbyn or previous support for the left has meant they were automatically disbarred. So one thing we know is that Ali is very much one of them, Keir Starmer and his crowd. Ali was recorded at a meeting shortly after the October the 7th atrocity, saying that, in his opinion, Israel had allowed this massacre to take place within its borders simply as a means to an end to justify the genocide that Israel is now inflicting on Gaza. Now, even people who are very, very critical of Israel and very, very critical of the Zionists that support unquestioningly Israel and everything Israel does, that claim, without proper evidence, without really hard evidence to back it up, it does seem at best speculation, at worst a conspiracy theory. So it's little wonder when these comments of Ali's were reported in the Mail on Sunday that it caused a right royal rumpus.
Under my leadership, there will be zero tolerance of anti-Semitism.
Once the story was leaked, a panicked Starmer obviously insisted that Ali rush out an immediate and grovelling apology. Cowardly Starmer completely avoided cameras and reporters over the Sunday and Monday as the story and its surrounding furore broke. But what he did do was send out some hapless Labour shadow cabinet frontbenchers to face the media and to try and justify what to most people seemed perfectly obvious was the unjustifiable. That the Labour Party position was they were standing by Ali and they were insisting, regardless of these comments, that he would remain the candidate in the upcoming by-election. Now, you can't have both. You can't both be saying the comments were totally unacceptable and it was horrendous and it was blatant anti-Semitism, but at the same time, we're still going to stand by him and we are insisting that he is still going to be the Labour candidate in the upcoming by-election. But that position, that was the Labour Party position, totally contradictory, totally untenable as a position, but nonetheless, that was the position that these hapless front-bench Labour MPs were sent out to defend. Here is an excerpt from a truly excruciating interview with Labour Shadow frontbencher Nick Thomas Simmons, where he attempts to defend the indefensible. In this situation, he seems to have decided that his best form of defence, his beard, was to use the rabid and, quite frankly, totally unhinged Zionists Louise Ellman.
I also take into account too what Dame Louise Ellman has said about Councillor Ali, who she's known over many years, standing alongside her when she was subject to anti-Semitic attacks, and her judgment that this is out of character. All I'm saying is that we're also taking into account what Councillor Ali has now said, that he fell for a conspiracy theory and they don't represent his real views, but also his history, as I've said, where Dame Louise Ellman, who has known him for many years. But in terms of this by-election going forward, as I've indicated, Kay, in a couple of earlier answers, it is this apology, this recognition that Louise Ellman has brought out of standing up against anti-Semitism in the past.
Ah, yes, Louise Ellman. We all remember her. We particularly remember her preternatural abilities to somehow read and intuit, possibly telepathically, people's thoughts, but not just their thoughts, but thoughts that that individual themselves didn't know they were having. Ooh, spooky. Here she is making her unique contribution to the smear campaign against Corbyn. Even the presenter in this excerpt can't quite believe what Louise Ellman saying.
So I suspect that Jeremy has a lot of those thoughts without registering that is anti-Semitism, but so much has been said about that by now, he really ought to understand what he's doing.
That actually Jeremy Corbyn's having anti-Semitic thoughts and not even recognising them as such because he doesn't see it.
Here's Pat McFadden on the Sunday the story broke, also trying to defend the indefensible.
He will be your candidate in Rochdale.
In the upcoming by-election, yes, he will.
And then, here he is the next day.
Keir Starmer has taken the tough but necessary decision today to withdraw support from our candidate in Rochdale.
It's like an episode of The Thick of It. If it wasn't so tragic, it might actually be funny, but it is tragic. It's worth just turning our attention to how the media covered this story. First, we have Channel 4. Yes, the image they chose was Ali with Jeremy Corbyn, a man who hasn't led the Labour Party for 4 years and isn't even a Labour MP, and who belongs to a completely different wing of the party. Of course, they could have used this image with the other man actually central to the story, or they could have used this image, the party's Shadow Secretary of State for International Development, campaigning with Ali on the previous day, or they could even have used this clip of the Labour Party's current deputy leader enthusing about Ali and encouraging everybody to vote for him.
Hi, I'm Angela Rayner and it's great to be here in Rochdale. And we've got Azhar Ali, who is our wonderful candidate who's going to be a big voice for Rochdale.
But no, they decided to go with a picture of Jeremy Corbyn. In fact, Jeremy Corbyn's only connection to the story, and it's a very, very tangential connection to the story, comes via Lee Harpen, the discredited Sun journalist. You may remember Lee Harpen was the one who described people leaving the Labour Party as a result of the party's stance on Gaza as fleas. Well, this time he tweeted, Labour sources suggest the person who recorded Councillor Ali's Israel October 7th speech was a pro-Corbyn local figure. So, to be clearly, the only person at that meeting who was concerned about the potential anti-Semitic content of these comments was actually somebody from the left, somebody who was a Corbyn supporter, according to you. But all the right-wingers, all the Starmerites, they just all sat there and thought, that was perfectly fine. No reason why these comments shouldn't be made. Really? Does Lee Harpen ever actually think through the full consequences of what he's tweeting? Because, if anything, this would show the local Corbynite supporter in a good light, and everybody else, i.e. all the people from his faction, in a very poor light indeed. We have the BBC's coverage of the story. Now, this is from the BBC's political correspondent. This is the individual who is supposed to provide impartial commentary. Now, this is what this particular political correspondent had to say. Hannah Miller. She wrote, "From day one of his leadership, Keir Starmer has been trying to rebuild relations with the Jewish community. He apologised to Jewish people for the anti-Semitism that had been a stain on his party and promised to eradicate it. Over the course of almost 4 years, his actions have gradually won back the trust of the Jewish community." But the thing is that this BBC political correspondent doesn't seem to be aware of the fact that the Jewish community isn't one homogenous bloc. She doesn't seem to realise that there are shades of opinion within the Jewish community. She doesn't seem to realise that Jeremy Corbyn always had a measure of support from individuals and organisations within the Jewish community. And even more worryingly, she doesn't seem to realise Keir Starmer hasn't rebuilt relationships with the Jewish community. What he's done is rebuild relationships with the ultra-right-wing Zionist element of the Jewish community, while totally alienating left-wing Jews, anti-Zionist Jews. UK Labour Party accused of discrimination over expulsion of Jewish members. Jewish members of the Labour Party are almost 13 times more likely to be expelled for supporting prescribed left-wing organisations than non-Jewish members, GVL, Jewish Voice for Labour, claims. And then we have very clearly illustrated in this whole story the way that Starmer is using the issue of anti-Semitism as a weapon against his political opponents, people on the left, but protecting people in his own faction, i.e. people on the right. And this was what Andrew Fisher so clearly explained on Newsnight on Monday night.
Why do you think Sir Keir Starmer didn't withdraw support from Azar Ali on Saturday night?
Because the Labour Party's procedures are entirely factional, and Azar Ali is somebody who's considered to be on the right of the Labour Party, and therefore his actions were excused. You had shadow cabinet ministers campaigning for him yesterday out in Rochdale. You had shadow cabinet ministers on the media this morning on radio and TV news defending him, saying it was just out of character and that he's actually a far more sensible person who just said something wrong. And now we're in this state. And we've seen this time and again. I mean, Alita brought up the cases of Andy McDonald and Kate Osmore, which, by the way, I disagree. I don't think what they said was remotely anti-Semitic, especially in the case of Andy McDonald. But we've also had cases like Barry Shearman, who accused Jewish people of getting in the House of Lords because shekels had been exchanged. He was not even suspended, just given a slap on the wrist and told to delete the tweet. Steve Reed, who's in the shadow cabinet, tweeted something anti-Semitic, which he apologised for, but was never suspended. So the rules aren't consistent at all. And we've got in this mess because it's factional.
So thanks very much for watching. Please help support Left Wing Voices on social media by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Chat soon.